Boom, boom. That is what's known as timing. Yeah, admit. Oh, that's so weird. Ooh. It sure is, Jason. Hi, Jeffrey.
What's up?
I wish I knew. Wish I knew. Having a good day?
Oh, only been up for a little bit.
Okay.
Played with the dog a little, got her fed, and got myself some food and some coffee.
I love
Billy
it.
Billy says hi.
Hi, Billy. I was just thinking, a couple weeks ago, how jealous I am of you because I'm already on to water, but you still get to talk with your coffee. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Yeah.
it has its benefits, but you know, you're also 3 hours ahead of me. So
That's true. That's true. But I still feel like miles behind.
eh, I wouldn't say that.
That's why I love talking to you. You got your shot, right? You got your second shot?
hmm
How you
I did.
feeling?
So, full disclosure,
Mm-hmm.
because information is power.
Yeah.
So, to precursor how I felt, back in September of 2019 through December of 2019, I was really sick.
Mm.
Um, After about 6 weeks of battling what I thought was just a chest cold, I was feeling something in my chest that just wasn't right. And I honestly thought I was having a heart attack. I
Mm.
was 33, 34 years old. And I'm like, there's something wrong here. This isn't good.
Right.
So I go and I go to see the doctor, and they're like, well, it is like pneumonia or bronchitis, but we're not seeing anything. So the treatment for it is the same. We're going to give you the same stuff. Take your inhaler and take your Z pack. We'll give you a double dose just because it sounds like it's stuck in there pretty good. So
Mm. Mm.
two Z packs didn't do anything. Zero. Now I've had pneumonia before, and I've had bronchitis before, and I've taken Z packs, and they clear things up pretty fast. But this didn't work. And the only relief that I really got was from taking my inhaler, and I got a little bit of relief from that. And then I also have a CPAP, so when I would lay down at night, that also really helped me out. So flash forward to I got my shot on Wednesday. A couple hours after I got my shot, felt like I got punched in the arm. No biggie. When I woke up the next morning, I was having trouble breathing. Not like, oh my God, this is like panic inducing. But like, as somebody who
Mm-hmm.
has asthma, it's like that precursor to, pay attention, take your inhaler, take it easy.
Right.
But then it started settling into that spot in my chest. I was like, I know what this is. Uh,
Mm.
so my suspicion was always that I had COVID before we knew what COVID was.
Right.
And what I felt after getting that second shot was almost exactly the same, just not as severe as when I ended up taking myself to the doctor. And so I'm pretty sure that I had COVID before we knew what COVID was. And so all of Thursday, I felt like trash. Had difficulties breathing, but not severe difficulties breathing. Um, on Friday, I went back to work, and still felt like I got punched in the arm.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of Thursday, my lungs had felt better. So I was like, okay, this isn't such a big deal.
It's going away after the 48 hours, like they said.
So I went back to work. So after 36 hours, I went back to work from home, so not a big deal. And I felt fine for most of the day until right about mid afternoon,
Mm.
when I started just kind of feeling a little bit run down, and then I started feeling it in my chest again, and I was like, I might have pushed it a little too soon. So, definitely was feeling a little bit Friday night, and then as soon as I was just resting and relaxing, it started going away again. I felt fine yesterday, and I feel fine today. The
Nice.
soreness in my arm was gone by Friday evening, and I haven't dealt with the lung stuff since then.
Okay.
So, one of the things people need to make sure is that no matter what vaccine that they get, make sure that you get some time
Yeah.
to recover from it, because Debbie was down for about 18 hours with symptoms, nothing after that, completely
Right.
fine. Emily never had anything. Not she didn't even feel like she got punched in the arm on the second shot.
Wow.
So, results, symptom results may vary. Side effect results may vary. Um, I probably, Debbie's joint pain was very severe, but
Mm.
given that Debbie has EDS, that definitely is a thing. Debbie also
Right.
had some kidney pain, and so when you're looking at the shot, there's a couple of schools of thought on this. One is that they're using this to figure out who had COVID. So when you have, if you're having certain symptoms like spiking the fever, difficulty breathing, things like that,
Right. Right.
they're seeing that as people who probably had COVID, and either A, they knew about it, or B, they didn't. And, I was pretty sure that I had it after we knew what the symptoms of COVID were.
Mm. Okay.
But my curiosity is also if I wonder if I got a variant of COVID before the variant of COVID that we really know as this lethal one that's been circulating around, and now we're on to the South African UK variant.
Right.
So, I mean, it was miserable, but there was also a spike in pneumonia cases around that period of time, which makes sense. WHO said that by December of 2019, there were already a dozen variants running around China.
Right.
So it would not surprise me if sometime between, say end of August, beginning of September, you get people that come over to the country. It's prime vacation time still,
Mm-hmm.
or people coming back from China. It doesn't really matter what, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone had brought it over and it started circulating. And of course, that's prime time. Like, kids are going back to school. The cold is running around. If you're
Sure.
like me and you're already, compromised because you're an asthmatic,
Mm-hmm.
you just expect to end up getting something for a little bit. That's why I get my flu shot. I don't get the flu shot because, it's particularly effective most of the time. You need enough people taking it in order, for herd immunity.
Right.
But number two, I take it because if I do get the flu, it's usually a lot less severe, and I'm not so bad off. So,
Okay.
and that's just something, as somebody with some, compromised lungs, that I just have to keep in mind every year.
Yeah. Plus, you're in a port town, and
Hmm.
you and New York were the two places that were immediately affected, by COVID. Like you were on the front lines in the beginning, Washington State was. And so it's
Hmm.
it's weird to me that people are like, don't trust the government. But yeah, COVID was here in December. Like they didn't try and cover it up for a few months. Yeah, maybe they did. Maybe they thought they could beat it. Maybe they didn't know it existed yet. But yeah, I could see that. And for me, it was about 36 hours actually that I was dizzy. I couldn't stand up for more than 10 minutes.
Mm.
But I also didn't eat because I was feeling like shit, which meant I didn't drink much water and I couldn't take like ibuprofen or anything because I don't want to take it on an empty stomach. So it just kind of perpetuated. But once I started chugging water and got some ibuprofen in me, I started feeling better.
Yeah, and that's so part of it is just like, if you don't feel like eating, make sure you get something in your system. Gatorade, some
Yeah,
soup, broth if you can't handle soup. Getting
right.
some of that, salt and electrolytes in your system help you deal with this pretty effectively.
Yeah.
Debbie chugged water, lots and lots and lots of water, and
Hmm.
I did the same leading up to it and post. So,
Okay. And I
you
don't
know,
know. I can't, looking back, like I didn't have an isolated lifestyle when COVID in February
mhm,
when it first came out. I had a friend move in and you know and so
right,
there's a chance I had it, but I don't know. Like the doctor in December told me I had cancer, and then checked in February and said I had cancer. But then it turned out in March I didn't have cancer, but then in I didn't have cancer. They didn't know what
right.
it was. They didn't know what it was, and it was just a swelling of the intestines, but my sugar
Mm.
levels dropped that off, but now it could be because you know, I'm feeling better overall. It ran its course. And I had a friend, Sherry, who had something in February and then in April got a call from the hospital, and the hospital was like, wow, you had COVID. Like, we didn't even
Yeah,
know it existed yet, and you
right.
had it. And she's been dealing with the symptoms ever since, you know?
And then, one of the nice things too is what they're finding out is that people who are getting the shots afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
like especially people who have had long haulers, is that they're finding that some of those symptoms are going away after people are getting vaccinated. So, you know, um, more research to be done on that, but
Of course.
preliminary signs are pretty good on that. My
Yeah.
hope too is that that's very much the case because my lungs felt like about -10% after having COVID for a while,
Yeah.
and so they eventually came back to what full felt like, but
Mm-hmm.
um man, when I got that second shot, it just reminded me, it's like, oh yeah, that was miserable.
Yeah, I think it'll generally weaken your system, which starts your immune system kicking in. And like Devi knows, like you know with your lungs, she knows with her joints, me with my intestines, it's going to affect the weakest part of your body. And so
Mhm.
if you're sure of yourself and your health and you don't know about any underlying conditions, maybe you want to risk COVID, but that's just going to weaken your body for the next virus that attacks the weakest part of your body. So
Mhm.
I honestly just think getting the vaccine is preparing for a future a future planet that we're going to be living in. You know what I mean?
Well, and there's a couple of things to think about too. Is that number one, this idea that solely the people being affected are people with comorbidities
Mm-hmm.
just isn't true. I mean, yes, it's mostly people with comorbidities, absolutely,
Sure.
but there are also a lot of cases of people being perfectly healthy and not a problem to them, and they drop dead faster than people with comorbidities.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that, whether or not you think your immune system can handle it, it's not about what you think, it's about the
Yeah.
reality of the virus. And the
Yeah.
virus is one of those things where you're either going to be just fine or you're going to have some problems, and some of those problems might go away fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them might take a while, some of them might land you in the hospital with a tube down your throat, and some of them might land you in a pine box.
Yeah. And
So
willpower isn't the enemy of COVID. You know what I mean? You can't just
no.
say I'm not going to get it or I'm strong enough to will it away. And we don't know in 10 years why it's affecting people the way why it is now, but we will know in 10 years. And
Mhm.
there could be there could be something in your brain that just everybody has a chemical imbalance, and maybe if you have a low chemical, that's going to affect you. So it's like we don't know yet. And even if you don't know you have a condition, you don't know you have a condition yet. Just because there isn't tests for it doesn't mean it's not the reason for it, you know?
And that's the other thing is like the quote unquote condition has been everything from, like, COVID has made people's hearts give out, it's made
Yeah.
people's lungs melt, it's just disintegrated internal
Yeah.
organs of various sorts,
Swelling
anything.
the brain. Yeah.
Yep. And so it's not like, oh well, this person has diabetes, so that's going to be it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you know, for my mom who had COVID, she got, the typical loss of taste and smell and the crappy lungs. But because my mom had colon cancer
Mm.
once upon a time and had her gallbladder removed about 10 years ago,
Ooh,
the residual side effects have been at those weak points. So
right.
even if you're completely healthy now, but have had problems in the past, like cancer and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, that's still a risk. And that's still something that you have to look at. And doctors in the field have been compiling a bunch of anecdotal evidence that people who've had problems with specific things in the past, when they get COVID, it attacks those weak points.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so trust me, I have all the willpower in the world, but I know the reality of my lungs for the
Mm-hmm.
last 25, 30 years has been that I got limited lung capacity because of asthma. And while I'm perfectly healthy most days, and sometimes I have to use my inhaler because my allergies get particularly bad, or it's also sports induced. And so if I'm working my butt off really hard, sometimes I got to take a puff.
Yeah.
It's under control, and I'm, moderately healthy. Need to lose some weight, obviously, but the reality is that despite everything that you can do to make yourself better, it's still going to attack those things. And this idea of, oh well, the virus doesn't kill you, like we talked about with Dan. The virus weakens your system severely. That allows in all these other secondary infections like
Right.
pneumonia. We don't quite understand why it's attacking things the way that it is, or what's happening to your immune system, and thus you're getting attacked at these weak points. We haven't had enough time. We don't
Yeah.
know.
But generally, your immune system, the white blood cells, they all go to your weak points, the points of pain, the points like Devi's joints. I had a partner like that too, that the joints just from allergies would just swell up and seize up
Mhm.
because that's the weak point that the everything's going to fight the problem there, and it's just causing problems. And Sherry has a weakened immune system, and so
Mhm.
she's already prone to other infections really easily, and now her long hauler syndrome is a continuing worsening of other infections easily getting in and attacking, you know what I mean? But she just sees it as an advancement of what was normal, and
Mhm.
now it's just, but she'll tell me every couple months, I can't believe what's going on, and she'll tell me the symptoms, which are kind of personal, and I'm like, I always want to say, like, oh, that sounds like you have long haulers, like attached with what you
Mhm.
were going through.
Absolutely, that's absolutely the case. And that's one of the things I think people have really failed to take into account is that
Yeah.
it's the long haulers syndrome is not pleasant. It's gonna wreak havoc on your body one way or another. It's either gonna be a mild annoyance or you're gonna have some severe issues to deal with.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people have failed to really think about is that the number of people who've had pretty bad cases of COVID that are surviving. The question is are they going to end up on disability for the rest of their lives?
Yeah.
And as someone who knows what disability looks like, on your end, you can definitely tell us,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the average person?
Mm.
What does working versus being on disability look like?
It's just nobody's thinking about it yet. So it's a system that's constantly being cut to fund other things. And
Hmm.
that's all it is. I have a friend, Caitlin, she's 28. She earns $900 a month. I have a friend, she's 21. She gets $500 a month. And that's because they haven't put in enough into the system. So that's the base. And then Medicare, I mean, it pays the total of right now $3,000 for drugs, doctor visits, tests, and one test costing $1,500, one MRI. You're kind of in your donut hole, and then you're paying full price until they start paying 75% again. So it's not a great system. And just on that topic, so I the ways the I don't know, our the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Representatives oversees the SSI and disability policies and regulations and all that. And so what I did was I found all of the people on the Ways and Means Committee. I made a tweet and put all of their names in it so that people could tweet them. And then I added all of their Twitter handles and phone numbers for their Washington offices underneath that tweet. So the Ways and Means Committee is the ones that we need to talk to, and we need to tell our stories to those people, and calling them and letting them know your story is going to help them because they're just reacting to the calls that they get. And if most of the calls they're getting are from radical points of view, then they're going to skew radical. I just learned this from somebody that actually does that. I was listening to a podcast, and that's all they do. And then they type up, after the
Mhm.
week, all of the issues and how many and the percent and who cares most. And so if we're not talking about it, then it's never going to be done. So I started out in making phone calls to these people and just telling them I want to get them on the record is what they're going to do, and try and get them on the show. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I just need other people need to do this too, because
Mhm.
if I'm just one voice, I look like an asshole. You know what I mean? But if there's more of us,
Mhm.
then I look normal. You know what I mean? Like, I made a tweet that said, "Dear Mayor, please stop killing black people. If another black person is killed under your watch, I will have to promote and support your opposition," and
Mhm.
I tagged my mayor in it. And by the way, my mayor just instituted a mental health response team in
Mhm.
addition to the police, but that was a lucky coincidence. But I'm the only
Mhm.
one that put my mayor on there. And so now, instead of us being a big group that nobody can like look at, it's just my mayor that's suddenly researching who the hell I am and how he can get back at me if he wants to. You know what I mean?
I mean that's just the reality of it is that when it comes to like social security and disability, like you have to go to the federal level with that. There's nothing that you're going to be able to do at your local
Right.
level unless your local level is investigating something like its own Medicare for all system. Washington has actually
Right.
started to look into that possibility.
Right. Which
One
is
of the
why it's more important to fix it. And because my friend gets this confused, Medicaid is state level, Medicare is federal level.
Mhm, exactly. And so like Medicaid is slightly better most of the time than Medicare. That said, it's still woefully underfunded most of the
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
And and to me, it's one of those things where like I don't mind the idea of states coming up with their own solutions at a statewide level. I mean, one of the things that we just have to empirically look at is that while America does have some of the best care available,
Hmm.
it is also the most expensive care available.
Yeah.
There's a reason why medical tourism exists. And we hear all of these, woe stories about, oh, you don't want to go to all these other places. I had a friend that literally went and got, I think it was either a hip or a knee replacement, and it cost them less to stay in Spain for 4 weeks getting their hip replaced
Hmm.
and physical therapy and being on vacation there than it would have to get their hip replaced in the United States.
Yeah.
I've got friends have who were pretty much crippled at this point, like couldn't walk. They
Right.
were once runners. They went to Germany and they got disc replacement surgery in Germany because it's not approved in the US.
Mm.
And they are back to running marathons.
That's awesome.
And it was cheaper than doing a spinal fusion surgery in the United States.
Yeah.
Literally replacing the discs in your back.
Yeah. Well,
So
I
so
think
the idea that our system is functioning properly is completely inadequate.
well, I think it might be functioning the way um
It's
the
functioning
exec
the way it's
the
designed.
yeah, the way the executives designed it and lobbied for, because when you have a issue, um your first thought is financial insecurity. It's never about bodily security. Like, it's never about your health. It's always about what this is going to cost. And that's horrible to think about. And
Hmm.
it always ends up to where insurance wants to push you faster than you are able, because the cost analysis. And then
Hmm.
suddenly there comes a point where they're like, well, here it is. And you're like, well, you tapped me out already. And they're like, well, then you have to make a choice. Do you need this? Do you want to go in debt for this? Or we're not going to give it to you. We're not going to give you what you need to finish off and secure your happiness, and health,
Hmm.
because you can't afford it. So when you can afford it, come back. And that leads to a deterioration, which means you're back at the starting level. And it's just weird to me that we're all just accepting that.
It's the way that you have to look at body maintenance is the way that you would have to look at a car's maintenance.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can keep running your car without doing an oil change, but you're eventually going to have to buy a new car because you're going to blow the engine. Or you're going to end up, or if it's any other part, you're just going to see this continual wear until it doesn't function anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The human body's much the same way. If you don't do the maintenance on it, i.e., like, start with blood draws, start with an annual physical. But if you have other issues,
Mm.
you have to fix the issue. You can't just mask the symptoms.
Right.
Masking the symptoms doesn't fix the issue. And that's one of the things that we've kind of found ourselves in, because masking the symptoms is cheaper than fixing the problem.
Yeah.
And but the in that's just short-term analysis is what that is. Long-term analysis is if you fix the problem, you might be down for a couple of months, but then you're back to being a productive member of society who's paying insurance premiums, who's blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah 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 blah.
Right.
Down, or you just keep falling down off of that slope until you're constantly sick
Mm-hmm.
and constantly in debt, and you're constantly on, the system, and you're never going to get out of it. And that in and of itself is absolutely horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is why, at least in this country, when I say that there has to be a massive change in the way that healthcare is approached, what I mean is that it has to take a centered solution on finding the problem and fixing the problem, because in the long run, it is cheaper and and more efficient to fix the problem in terms of a capital gain. If you're going to be a capitalist about it, be an actual capitalist about it. Fix the problem, get somebody back to work and making you money and paying your salary,
Yeah.
because that's really what it. If you're going to do that route, do that route. Like, actually fix the problem, actually get people back to work and being productive members of society.
But
Otherwise,
that's gonna short their quarterly profits.
and that is where things are at currently. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to bitch about a bunch of socialists wanting to take advantage of the system, but the problem is that they can't get better, so they can't get off the system. So what you have is a bunch of socialists on the system. So, like,
Right.
you're creating the problem that you swear you hate, and so it's like the irony of that is always funny to me. Is that
What?
if
Yeah.
you're going to bitch about socialists and people taking advantage of the system, you need to start with well, who's on the system to begin with, and why are they on the system? If it's medical,
Yes.
fix the fucking medical problem. If you
Right.
don't want people on the system, figure out why they're on the system and actually fix the problem. Otherwise, don't be surprised when you have a bunch of people who are socialist,
On the
because they
system.
literally have no choice.
Yeah. And
You've
it's
left them with no choice but to be socialist. And that is the irony of it, is that they think that, they have made capitalism so great that they have this choice, but the people who are literally stuck on the system have no choice but to be stuck in a socialist system.
it's like
And
getting run over time and time again. Yeah.
it's the system that they created. And that's the funny part about it, is that they don't see that.
Well, here's the interesting thing. The young socialists are like Medicare for all, and the moderates are like, yeah, but this system is kind of weak. And the Republicans are like, and we're cutting the fuck out of it. And the
And then the
progressives are like,
people
no, dump people on it. And the moderates are like, you can't take it. And Republicans are like, nope, we want them to die. And the socialists are like, hey, put everybody, and you got to fix
and
the
then the people are
system.
on Medicare. The people that are on Medicare are like, yo, bro, no, 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 you don't want this, please, no, 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 no.
Right. I tweeted that. I was like, if you're going to put everybody on Medicare, then you need to fix Medicare. And I got like hundreds of likes just on that alone, because people on the system know, like my
Mm-hmm.
friend, I had an interview Friday. It's a podcast on inspirations beyond disabilities with my friend Ezric, who has an eye condition, which has 15 variants. And out of those 15 variants, there's research that's proving that he can get genetic injections in his cornea to reverse some of the effects and give him better quality of care. So He went to his doctor. His doctor gave him the test. The test was positive. He said, yes, you can get this. He applied for it. The doctor applied for it. Medicare, Medicaid, New York Medicaid said, yep, we're going to do this. And then dragged their feet for 2 years on the paperwork.
Yep, that
And
sounds
then
about right.
finally, Ezra called his doctor and said, what am I supposed to do? And the doctor said, it's your insurance. What are we supposed to do? So Ezra, smart guy that he is, called the drug manufacturer and said, hey, I qualify for this and I'm not getting it, and they took care of it in 2 days. They called because they need the research. That's why they're putting people in the studies like this, is to
Hmm.
get the research. And if nobody qualifies and nobody's going to be on it,
Right.
so there's this combination of it's way too expensive because it's way too new. And then there's this combination of we don't pay enough. And then there's the doctor saying, you need this. And so it's not a quality of life thing, or it is a quality of life thing. It's not life or
Hmm.
death, but it makes the difference. My friend Caitlin had diabetes. She lost her eyesight. She went to the doctor. The doctor gave her a laser surgery. She opened her eyes. She could see colors. She could see patterns on shirts. And you know what her first thought was? What if I get kicked off of my insurance? I'm not good enough to drive, but I'm not bad enough to, he might leave me in this realm of not legally blind, but not seeing well enough. And that's what
Hmm.
people are worried about. Ezric is worried about the insurance. I was worried about my insurance getting me test strips for a fucking blood sugar monitor. And that's the problem is, and I could go on and on about the issues with this stuff. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Even with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And
Hmm.
it's they should be a non-factor. If you can't
Mm.
provide the care that you say you're going to provide, get out of the game of providing it to us. Just say we don't insure people that make less than 250,000 a year. You know what I mean? Because then we can make other plans. But you keep making it seem like you have all the answers and you're going to cover me until it comes time when I need coverage. And then you're like, oh, yeah, we covered you except for that, and that's the problem with the system. We're being lied to. And Trump's plan was to just make it a la carte, like, guess what you're going to get next and just get covered on that. So,
Right.
I mean, it's a horrible, people in the system give a fuck. Doctors, nurses, they
Hmm.
care, and they love meeting people like this because that furthers their education and their knowing and their knowledge for the next person. But insurance is just, it's defeating us. It's just, it's
And
it's bad.
and that's why, like, the conversation that we've had is, that we've had, that I've had with others, is that as much as I hate the binary, because right now what we're on is, I would call, the third option, which is this insurance riddled, bureaucracy riddled system that takes a bunch of money but provides little care.
Right.
So if that's the route that we're going to go, then basically you're just going to keep wasting money on insurance companies and administrative fees, federal government and federal administrative fees.
Mm-hmm.
And you, the person who's actually needing care, who's had to talk to probably 60 people in order to, get one test strip, prescription approved.
Right. Right.
The just being able to buy the test strips, if you had either an entire socialized system, or even if, like we talked about with the cash-based HSA system,
Right.
either way, either one of those ways would have been quicker and cheaper than the current bureaucracy that exists. And
Right.
while, one of the things that I've talked about with several people, who look at all of these socialized systems and socialized medical systems, is that, for us, for who we are, we don't own a system of doctors, because they're not technically government employees. So when you look at the cost structure, because I worked as a data analyst in a hospital system,
Well, I love
you have a
this.
you have a lot of cost structures that people don't tend to think about. So, for
Mm.
example, right now, one of the biggest cost centers for hospitals is malpractice insurance. When I tell you that it eats up a metric fuck ton of the budget,
Mm-hmm.
or an imperial fuck ton of the budget, doesn't matter, metric or imperial, it is still just a massive amount.
Yep.
So with that massive amount of the budget that is completely taken up by malpractice insurance, That is one piece of the puzzle that's expanding your costs. So how do you deal with that cost? Well, unfortunately, this is where my HSA system idea falls apart, in that these people are still going to have that level of coverage. But in a cash-based system, because you're getting that money turned around faster, their fees are cheaper. That means that they're able to pay things out a lot faster. Money today is a lot better than money 120 to 150 days from now, because that's the reality under the current insurance system. Or under the socialized medicine system, doctors are government employees, and therefore they fall under the purview of the government. And if you know anything about suing the government, it's damn near impossible.
But here's the thing. If a doctor commits malpractice,
Mm-hmm.
then you sue him to make yourself whole again. And so that's that's the problem, is that money isn't going to make you whole. You're going to use that money to go to a doctor and pay him to make you whole. So it's just a transfer of funds. The issue it's an issue. Here's the issue. The issue is an insurance company says to everybody, the max coverage will give you is $500,000. But then the prices get raised so that you're just slightly out of that range and you'll end up paying out of pocket at some point. And then the insurance companies say, well, you need more coverage. We will offer you 75,000. But then the costs get raised, maybe by
Mm-hmm.
this malpractice insurance, raising the cost of malpractice insurance while you're raising the premiums for people, and then you're just slightly out of range and everything costs slightly more. And now we're in this perpetual cycle of every quarter they're raising the premium and raising the cost so that it balances out, so that the executive is getting a bonus for the profits he's getting from malpractice insurance, as well as the bonus from the out-of-pocket expenses, because other people can't afford the 75,000. I can afford the 3,000, but the prices are still based on somebody being
Mm-hmm.
covered for the 75,000.
So with that particular cost structure, that is something that is very difficult to actually deal with, unless there is a just a grand shift in how malpractice is treated, or or the burden of being able to sue doctors for malpractice. And that's just the reality, is because we
Mhm.
live in a country where anybody can sue anybody. If I wanted to, Jason, I could walk down to the Thurston County Courthouse tomorrow and file a lawsuit against you for God knows whatever. Now,
Sure.
it's stupid on my part, because it's going to cost me a bunch of money. I'm going to lose whatever case I decided to file against you.
Hmm.
I'm probably going to have to pay attorney's fees, but in the end, that still costs you.
Right. But
You're not going to be made whole by that. And when you look
right.
at malpractice, that's a lot of the times that's what's happening too, is that it's there are plenty of cases in which doctors are not listening to their patients. There are plenty of cases where doctors are doing things that are counterproductive, and very few cases where they're actually
For sure.
malicious.
For sure.
But there, a vast majority of cases are people are expecting a particular outcome, that when the doctor says, I don't know that this is possible, but we'll give it a go.
Right.
You've got people filing wrongful death suits on people who are 80, 85, getting
Hmm.
risky heart procedures done. And it's like, look, at 80, 85, I mean, I don't know that this is actually going to work. And and
Right.
and as somebody who's had family members that have done that, we prepare ourselves for that eventuality, that the surgery is going to fail. But for a lot of people that end up filing suits, it's just like, well, they said my dad was going to be better. It's like, he's 85, man, and a quadruple
Right.
bypass on anybody is a fucking tax,
And
let alone on somebody at that age.
there's a perception, I think, that's happened where people, something happens like that and their first thought is, I'm going to be rich. And it's not,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be made whole. And I know a lot of people that have won those suits and not
Mm-hmm.
fixed the problem. and bought a new
Yes.
house and a new car, and then suddenly they're broke and they still have the condition. That you
Yup.
being made whole might be a panel to choose a better doctor and plan for you. Instead of giving you money, it should be, okay, well, here's this panel of 12 people that have researched it. Like that's what they do when a stroke victim comes in, 10 doctors come in, they create a health plan and then submit that, and it's cost free. And everything, your pills, your transportations, everything, you should not have to pay out of pocket for anything to be made whole again. But it isn't
I've
like,
worked on those stroke programs doing
yeah,
the data analysis on it. And one of the cool things about that level of care is that, you're actually taking the approach of let's actually get this person fixed. And that's
right,
and once again, we can bitch about all of these different aspects of it. It boils down to get a person fixed. So
right,
so malpractice insurance, the biggest cost center, we know that.
right.
Next on the agenda are this is always a fun one, prescription drug coverage. And
Mm,
unfortunately for all of my capitalist friends out there who are going to be like, oh, we need a system of competition, we've talked about this before. When you have let's say, I want to say it's like 11,000 hospitals across the country, and you have 4 drug manufacturers, the ability to sway price is
mhm.
not in the hands of the 11,000 hospitals.
and
It is in
and
the hands of the 4 drug manufacturers.
and the 5 drug distributors.
Yep. So the reality is that there is no competition. You have essentially a cartel.
Right.
And
Yes.
even though they're not supposedly
Yeah, there's no proof of
coordinating
collusion. Right.
and coordinating their decisions, we're not stupid. The prices keep going up, and they're going up at rates that it's not, the cost of manufacturing them isn't going up that fucking fast.
No.
I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night.
$900 for insulin is ridiculous when it costs 25 cents to make. And I mentioned this on Inspirations Beyond Disabilities. Does anybody remember Walgreens saying, "Holy cow, COVID is horrible. It's affecting people, 11, 21 million people at its height were out of work. We're going to lower our costs and make a little less on this?" No. No. Walgreens, CVS, they didn't lower their drug prices because there was an epidemic. They kept their prices the same. And I would consider that price gouging.
That's, and unfortunately, I wouldn't. I'd consider it fucking immoral.
Well,
But
yeah, capitalism at its
y-
finest.
yeah, and what we've come to learn in all of this is that, all these different moratoriums and freezes and price reductions, this all could have been done before, but
Yeah.
it's easier to keep people bent over the table and getting railed.
Yeah, because they're always looking for a way to squeeze another penny out of you. You know what I
And
mean?
and so when you realize that there are 11,000 hospital systems essentially,
Hmm.
and they are up against 4 pharma manufacturers and 5 distributors,
Right.
this idea of competition doesn't actually exist in the way that you want it to exist, because your large hospital systems are going to get better prices because they have better volume. In the rural health system where I worked, we worked on getting smaller hospital systems together to purchase as a large hospital
But
system.
does that
And
lower the cost? Does that
yes, it
lower the
did.
cost? Or do
It
they just
did.
base their profits on the average?
It did. It lowers the cost for the average person. Absolutely. I can tell
Yeah,
you that as someone who has done the data analysis
I
on it.
like that then.
It does work, but the idea that it's going to work in a way that is as effective as you want it to is not a reality. Because when you look at what other socialized countries have, why their prescription drug prices are what they are, it's because you have 4 manufacturers, 5 distributors, and 1 purchasing agent, and that is the government of the country.
Right.
So the competition is now what it actually should be. You have these companies saying, hey, buy my product. We're going to give you the best price we can. And they're competing against each other.
Hmm.
Whereas in our system, you have 11,000 hospitals competing against each other and 4 drug companies. So that, you know, it's competition, but it is like competition to see who can get fucked the
Right.
least when you don't want to get fucked.
You don't want to pay my rates? I'll go to the hospital right next door because they're for profit. And that's the problem. Lowering drug costs is like McDonald's lowering their food costs. The price is always going to be 99 cents for that burger, but they're going to try and make it for 5 cents. And so that's the problem with a for-profit hospital who a lot of the hospitals are owned by just a few groups, you know what I mean? And so
Mm.
you can get the price down for into 99 cents for insulin, but the national, if everybody else is paying $900, then the hospital still can make a profit at 700 and say, hey, we're lowering the cost for you.
And so that's where you have this, this reality where, as much as I like less government involvement, there's the reality of the situation is if you want competition that's actually going to lower drug prices,
Hmm.
you have to use the federal government of the United States as the purchasing agent.
But that brings
And
me,
those companies now have to actually compete to be the ones supplying the product.
but that brings us to my major issue with the healthcare system, and that's administrative costs. You know,
Dude,
the
our
the
administrative
costs,
costs right now are fucking nuts because
yeah,
you
the
have
cost of
you have the
filing the
hospital system,
paperwork, right?
you have the insurance company, you have the drug companies, you
Yeah,
have your state companies.
the bureaucracy of it all. And
Oh,
so
dude.
including, and this is something credit to you, if you include the federal government and you're just throwing money at administrative costs for the government as opposed to the hospital system, it's just a transfer of wealth. It's not really eliminating a cost. So you need to
Mhm.
fix the system, the bureaucracy of Medicare and Social Security before you introduce anything like that, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so the reality is that if you want competition that's actually going to lower drug prices, you have to unify somewhere
Hmm.
to make it so that these drug companies actually have to compete in order to be the supplier.
Right.
Or you just end up doing like what a lot of people are doing, and they're buying their drugs from Canada, and you're hearing politicians go, "Oh, well, we don't know what the quality is like in these third world countries." Canada's not a fucking third world country, you
Yeah.
fucks. It's like, I'm sorry that your political donations are going to get a little tighter this year, you douchebag.
And you remember NAFTA?
I do remember
Do you
NAFTA.
remember Donald Trump negotiating a new NAFTA?
Yep,
That
USMCA.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you know what that was? That was Mexico, Canada, and America coming to a decision on prescription prices, written by the prescription, the medical, the pharmaceutical companies. That's who wrote it. So it just became three different prices in three different countries to we're eventually going to level off to one price overall. And it might lower the United States a bit, but it's going to raise it for Canada and Mexico.
Yeah, and this is one of those things like the idea that some people have on what capitalism looks like.
Yeah.
It's functioning the way that I would say predatory capitalism is supposed to function.
Hmm.
These companies are literally preying on the fact that all of these smaller systems are never going to be able to figure out how the fuck places like
All right.
Canada and the UK and Germany and Norway and Sweden get such low drug prices.
Right. But here's the thing is capitalism works. Capitalism is the system. The problem is the government intervention in it. It's the government juicing it for one side and not the other. The subsidies for oil. You know what I mean? Like
The
it's these,
subsidies for oil, the subsidies for big
right,
pharma, the
the
subsidies
lack
for
of
Amazon and Walmart and
eliminating regulations for Wall Street, and it's so
Mhm.
that's what it is. It's not fair competition, not because of capitalism, but because of government
I mean,
intervention.
look at the responses that you saw with just the GameStop.
Yeah.
You know, a bunch of fucking plebs on the internet on Reddit figured
Hmm.
out how to completely turn the system on its head, and rather than saying, "Hey, a bunch of individuals figured out how they could make the system work for them," everybody on fucking Wall Street
Hmm.
and in the Capitol went, we should probably look into how we can make sure that these fucking piss ants can't ever do that again.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just absolutely insane.
But that's the problem is if I need something as a disabled person and I go talk to Joe Manchin and I have nothing to offer except a request, he doesn't really have to do it. Like, okay, here's the perfect example. Corporations came out, like 200 of them, right, and said, we don't like voter suppression laws. Do not do it. But the Chamber of Commerce, the group that all of these people are in that lobbies the Congress, is saying no, we're lobbying for these laws. We're lobbying to not pass
Hmm.
the law on the that they want to pass HR1. And so that's the problem, isn't it? Right there is that I have nothing to offer as a person saying I need help, but they can talk out of both sides of their face and come up with a shirt
Hmm.
that says, yes, we support you, but then pays a guy $1 million to not, you know?
Right, right, and that's exactly it.
Yeah.
The companies that have flat out said, yeah, we support it, or no, we don't. It's like you got to look at the record of who they're using to lobby for their cause.
Right. Well, now those corporations actually got a letter from a group saying you need to leave the Chamber of Commerce, or we're going to assume that you do in fact support that. And I mean, the one company I know that has been mentioned is Target.
Hmm. And that's that's one of the rough ones is that the idea that these companies aren't going to continue to lobby for their best interests is completely misguided,
Yeah,
but the idea that they're going to leave an organization that is largely lobbying for them is also misguided.
that's
it's
misguided.
it's the political lip service
Hmm.
that is this system is that I'm going
Yeah,
to tell you I'm going to do one thing and I'm going to stand out there. It's no different than when in post murder of George Floyd, you saw a bunch of cops go out there and kneel with protesters, and everybody's like, "Yay, this is so wholesome!" And then later that
yeah,
night, they're dressed up in riot shields and beating people, and I'm like,
right.
"What did you expect to happen here?" It's
Yeah,
like, one action doesn't make the system all better. I mean, you're seeing it still play out. Trump's gone. He's out of office. He's doing whatever moronic stuff he's doing.
yeah,
And the Democrats are acting like this is all better. Hooray, we fixed the problem. And meanwhile, we've gone from kids in cages to children in overflow facilities.
right.
And we've gone from no more war, no more endless wars to fuck it, let's bomb Syria again. Um,
Yeah,
but then you also have the hilarity of a group of people who have been protesting us being at war in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years. Now that Biden's like, yeah, we're going to pull out of Afghanistan. This has clearly been a fucking failure.
right.
And you have those people that have protested being there going, now hold on, what are we going to do if. Let me tell you what's going to happen. It's going to, let me open up this playbook from about 50 years ago. It's going to look like Vietnam. It is going to look almost exactly like Vietnam. We have literally thrown time, materials, and bodies at this.
Hmm.
Some of our own, some that aren't.
Right.
A lot that aren't.
But when Trump wanted to pull out, the liberals were all like, no, you can't do that. But then Biden says
And
we're pulling out, and all the Republicans are like, what? No, you can't do
no,
that.
and that's, and it's like, look, yeah, I don't know what in the fuck you're on, but if the answer is get out of an endless war, get out of an endless war.
Yes,
Clearly this has not worked.
that's right.
It's
And
there's nothing we're going to do that's actually going to change this. I mean, for God's sakes, Biden went to WN Obama, and both were like, "Yeah, fuck this, get out of it."
mhm. Well, the thing is, I think people are worried about, and I've heard this, is that what about the people that are affected by our absence? And actually, the answer to that is just refugee programs around the world.
That's what we
I
did
am
with Vietnam. That's what we did.
I'm a believer that if you don't want to live in that country, you should be able to go to a country you want to live in. I believe North Korea should be just like North Korea. If they want to be North Korea, they can be North Korea. But I think they shouldn't keep their people prisoner in that if they don't want to be there.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that everybody would leave North Korea because it's North Korea.
Maybe, or you might get some new people in there that like it. But that's the same thing with like China. You know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
the Uyghurs are they follow Islam. They don't follow whatever Jainism or whatever whatever the
Secular,
Chinese people
they're
follow.
secular. They
So
no religion. Period. End of
so
story.
and that's the problem is the Uyghurs caused a threat. So people put them they're in re-education programs now. Like and so and I
Yeah.
that was one of my topics. That's why I'm segueing to it, is that people are calling that a genocide when I think it's a crime against humanity. And I know we're splitting hairs here, but that brings me to the thought of, you know, what would make a real big difference is if Joe Biden said our treatment of the American Indians, and I'm not calling it indigenous because Mexicans are indigenous to the United States 170 years ago. So if he called our treatment of them genocide, and
Hmm.
if if not killing a bunch of people is a crime against humanity, and just enslaving them and putting them in camps and slowly killing them as they escape is a crime against humanity, wouldn't that what we would be calling our treatment of African Americans? And until we own up to that stuff, I don't think we have any real moral high ground in saying Armenia was a genocide. It shouldn't matter what we say after what we did until we own up to what we did.
Well, I think you're partly right on that, and the reason I would disagree with you on the Uyghurs genocide is that
It isn't.
I would say that it is a genocide because the documents that have been coming from inside of China is that there is a systemic rape in order to quote unquote breed the Uyghur out of them. There's a systemic murder
Oh,
to get rid of people, a systemic destruction of their homes and their culture, and a systemic
that's for
destruction
sure.
of their places of worship and life simply because they are we I would call it a genocide.
But
It fits the
genocide,
text, it fits the textbook definition of
okay.
genocide.
I always thought of genocide as murder and a crime against humanity as other. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, when it comes to genocide, it's not just murder. Um, Genocide is also there's a sexual aspect to it as well. Like
Hmm.
um, what you'll see if you look it up. And you're looking at cultural destruction. It's what you're seeing is no different than what Nazi Germany did to the Jewish population.
That is the textbook example, isn't it? But then are we worried about the Taliban committing crimes and genocides once we leave to the women of the area? Isn't that why we're there to prevent that while we create a new system, a new government for them that can prevent that themselves?
Because the Afghanistan people are the same people, it's just you're looking at different religious sects
Right,
essentially, and you're looking at so one wanting to be more modernized, one not. It
right.
does not fall into the textbook version of genocide
Oh my
because
God.
they believe that they're one people. It
That's
would be
so
like that would be like if what we called
right.
the Civil War as a genocide.
That's
It's the same
funny.
people. It's the same people, and it wasn't that we were trying to eliminate them.
So that's kind of like what the US is right now, is that half the Democrats claim they want to move forward and be more enlightened and more um, new, but the Republicans are a older religion that are like, no, we want to be like the Taliban here and suppress you a little more. That's interesting. That was just a spontaneous
Yep.
thought, by the way.
And then and so then you have the reality of what the United States has done with the Native American peoples, the first
Hmm.
peoples, and the reality is that Nazi Germany based their entire program off of what we did.
Yes, our eugenic, right?
Our reservation system, our treatment and destruction, our murder,
Yeah,
literally, everything that we did to that the United States government did to the Native American population is textbook genocide
yeah.
because it was murder. It was the idea that you would breed the Native American out of them. It was
Yes,
systemic destruction of their culture, and literally just straight up murdering them just because
right.
it fits textbook genocide. And the fact of the matter is that it makes it easier to recognize the Armenian genocide because, well, it's half a world away and we don't have to confront anything that we didn't do.
Right.
Whereas if you tell somebody to actually confront what we did here, ooh, and the left and the right both go, ooh, what? But I don't want to have to touch that. That feels icky. Well, it should feel icky.
Right.
Because it is. It's terrible. It's fucking awful.
It's a third rail, and you're going to have to watch and walk your words, not knowing what enlightenment is until you get there.
Mm,
But
so
we need to address that, I think. You know what I mean?
absolutely, and you because you don't get better until you address it. I mean, you look at Germany now. Germany has had to come to terms with what the country did.
Yeah.
Are the mass amount of Germans now anti-Semitic? No. But by acknowledging their country's role in one of the worst atrocities known to man, they have come out to be better and stronger as a people and as a country.
Yeah.
We're not going to see that until we do the same.
Right. And the compromise actually was the lucky thing about Germany, and the difference is that they can turn to one man and say, yes, this was a horrible thing Germany did, that Hitler did. You know what I mean? It's this pass off. It was the Hitler regime. It wasn't Germany as a whole. It was a way of life in the time of Germany in
It was a way of life that a
1930s.
lot of Germans very, very well embraced.
Right, right. But we
Everybody wanted to
can't.
say they weren't a Nazi afterwards because, oh, well, I didn't kill the Jews. Yeah, well, you certainly didn't help them either. And
Right,
that is also the reality of the system of the United States. Yeah, you might not have killed Native Americans, but you sure as shit didn't help them either.
right. And that's the whole point of the African American community. They built our
Mm,
they built our country, and once we had everything that they built for us, we were like, all right, we got everything, you're free now. And they're like, well, what can we have? And we're like, oh, nothing. We're just gonna pick on you for the rest of the time, you know?
right. I mean, we have a lot of history to come to terms with,
Yeah,
and the fact of the matter is that one side doesn't want to address it because, well, it's not like I did it.
right.
That's not what this is about. It's
Mm-mm.
about acknowledging what the United States government has allowed to exist,
And
and the left
yeah,
doesn't want to acknowledge it because, well, it's going to feel icky.
right.
Yeah, it should. And you have few groups of people that are like, yeah, we're acknowledging it, and it really fucking sucks because it's
Yeah.
terrible.
The people will acknowledge it all day long, you know what I mean?
Government,
But the other thing is, you know who else is acknowledging it? Every other country.
yeah,
And you know who uses it against us when it attacks its citizens? Russia. You know,
and China.
Russia always says this is their mantra. Look what America does to its black people. We don't do that to you. We're better than them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, and that is a reality that until we're willing to face and actually, commit not just words but actions as well.
Hmm.
All of these politicians can say whatever they want, but until we fully recognize the systemic slaughter that we've committed,
Right.
it's not going to change anything. And I say that as someone who had family from the South and had family from the North, in the Civil War.
Right.
There's a reality. It's like, if I look at that route, he's like, what, am I neutral in this? Because I had some family members that did some bad things. I had a family member that sat on, that was Abraham Lincoln, Secretary of State.
Right.
So does that absolve? Does that absolve me? How does that work?
I don't know, man.
That's not how it works.
No. No.
So until we learn to confront our past and then make a plan about how we make things right moving forward,
Hmm.
as we've talked about, when it comes to equal rights, just because somebody else gets more rights, that does not mean you get less. Just because somebody now has more opportunities, that does not necessarily mean you have less.
Right. Right.
Just because somebody now has a path forward doesn't mean you don't.
That's right. It increases your ability, in fact. It just opens up more opportunities for everybody. Like, what's built for me works for you.
Exactly. So that's always that's a rough conversation to have, and until we have it, we're just going to keep circling the drain on the same arguments back and forth.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to pay their lip service. Nobody's going to do anything about it.
Oh yeah, it's well, the whatever the government wants us. I'm not saying that. I hate that when we say the government. Here's the thing: is like I understand the libertarian point of view. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
don't think it's being explained right. We
No.
government, I like government. I like government. I don't like every form of government, but every country has to have a government. It just does. But what I think the issue is the bureaucracy of that government. And
Hmm.
politicians are just trying to work within that bureaucracy. And so I don't
Mm-mm.
think it's government. You can say smaller government, you can say bigger government. I don't think that covers it. And you can say, let's get new politicians in, but they're still going to have to conform to the bureaucracy, the rules, the red tape, the four people getting paid to do one thing. Like I heard a Republican say, look, here's the thing. Joe Biden wants to throw $2 trillion at something, but where's that money going to end up? Is it actually going to land on the problem that you needed, or is it just going to be filtered down and lost in the bureaucracy of it all? And I finally, the guy from Michigan, I wish I could remember his name, but I was like, I think I just heard a reasonable Republican. You know what I mean?
So you have that route, but then you also have those same people that are creating the red tape, so that way their corporate butt buddies can get all the
Yeah.
benefits and not pay anybody else. So it's great lip service, and I
Yeah,
and I
yeah, yeah,
applaud
yeah.
them for recognizing and approaching the point, but they're more than willing to actually take the those things
Yep.
and then make it work for them,
Yep,
and,
exactly.
and for their political donors. I the talking out of the side of their mouth is it's lovely. It's such beautiful lip service to a
Oh
problem
my
that they have
gosh, yeah.
absolutely no intention of fixing.
No, they don't. No, they don't. And I tell this to people every day. I mean, Joe Biden gave me a check. Thank you. That lasted about 3 minutes. And now I'm still stuck in the same shit that I've been stuck in that the government did to me. You know,
Hmm.
I'm 50 years old and I've never been able to pursue happiness because of the interests of the government. The government has kept me suppressed and down in a variety of different ways. You know what I mean? When I think about it, like I
Hmm.
couldn't just, and that's part of it. Like you can't just go to Italy and live for a year. There's red tape. And like, I don't know, there's just, you can't have dual citizenship anymore. There's little things that just, they just suppress you in the weirdest ways. And I'm just tired of, but people want to
Hmm.
burn down the government. It doesn't matter if you burn down the Congress building, the bureaucracy will still be there. What we need is people. Here's the thing, like when you're in college, you have to come up with a thesis, right? Which is a great idea. And that's how your worth is projected. When you go into the government, you have to come up with something revolutionary, something to change the system, like Elizabeth Warren's Consumer Protection Agency. But we have politicians working on those things, hundreds of them, thousands of them, working on new ideas that will clutter up a system that's already cluttered. They're not working on, oh, we can't eliminate regulations because that's a Republican thing. They just want to add more red tape to prove their worth.
Hmm.
That's the issue.
Yeah. Which is why, one of the things that I think absolutely has to happen is just a full audit of the government.
Mm-hmm.
You do this in corporations all the time, where you have a full audit of policies, you have a full audit of all
Mm-hmm.
of these policies, procedures, everything that you can about imagine.
Right.
Because at some point the system becomes less efficient than it should be.
That's
And
right.
that's just what happens over the years. The difference is that rather than sitting down and auditing itself and saying, you know what, these two things don't exactly match, let's come up with something that actually makes
Right.
sense, have one thing replace two and have it be more efficient. Instead, they have these two things, and then they create another thing that stacks on top of that, but it doesn't quite stack
Right.
evenly to cover the gap, so we have to kind of jimmy all of these things around. And it's
Right.
having that audit
I
would
think
make far more sense.
I think Donald Trump was that audit. I just think we put an incompetent man in to do it. But I think Donald Trump and Drain the Swamp, I think, was the call for that audit. I just don't think he was the man to do it. You know what I mean?
I think that there are enough people out there on the whole political spectrum that really do want an audit of the U.S. governmental system.
Yeah,
The problem is that it's the partisan issue of it is that the left wants people to audit the system so that way they can enact certain things. The right wants uh, an audit of their own so that way they can act on certain things.
right.
And the reality is it's not a partisan thing. It's really just about making
Yeah.
sure that one party gets what it wants and the other party can get stuffed.
Well, yeah, but it should be a tuning of the bus. I mean, wheels on the bus go round and round, but we need the engine to work to do that for all of us, not just for one party or the other. We're dragging each other back and forth, you know?
But that's where we're at right now is it's not about having the system work for the American people. It's about
Right.
having the system work for the government that's in power.
Well, yeah, because the one party that enacts the rules don't have to follow the rules.
Uh-huh, exactly.
There's no antitrust for government. You know what I
No,
mean?
there's not. And so and that's where we sit with the current system because we're not actually forced to create a system that's based on actual and whole compromise.
No.
It's a hey, we're in power right now, so we're going to do a whole bunch of shit. And then the next time that the other party's in power, they're going to be like, cool, we're going to undo all of that shit and we're going to do all of our own. But we can't undo all of that shit because the court will say no. So we're just going to like mix and mash and turn it into a royal clusterfuck.
Yeah, right, right. And now that brings so let's talk about federal interference because I don't understand something, and that is
Hmm.
the fact that Republicans, they believe in state rights and
Hmm.
less federal intervention. So if
Hmm.
that's true, why are they suddenly creating hundreds and hundreds of illegal laws that they know are going to be court cases, federal court cases?
Simple answer, because fuck you. That's why.
Right.
The,
Okay.
the current state of the Republican Party is not actually about smaller government. That is the honest to God truth.
Okay.
They're not about smaller government. They're not about fiscal responsibility. The current state of the conservative government I would consider them more of a theological branch
Mm.
rather than an actual fiscal conservative, policy conservative, less government conservative. Anything that actually means smaller, they're not that.
Right.
Like all of they had no problem with all of these stimulus packages that Trump passed for trillions of dollars. Then
Right.
magically when Biden wants to pass something, they're like, whoa, 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 that's way too much money. It's like, okay, you passed three of these fuckers, don't even start with
Right. But we don't want to get into that. He
me.
spent, she spent. You know what I
No,
mean?
no, it's
I don't want Biden spending 10 trillion because Trump spent 7 trillion, you know?
exactly. So there's problem number one. The conservative side of politics isn't actually conservative
It's
in
yeah.
any sense of the word conservative by means of smaller.
Right.
They have taken on a theological identity, and they don't actually want to see smaller government. I would say that the only thing conservative is that they want to see a certain group of people have smaller rights. We'll go with
Yeah.
that. That's the only thing that I can see. Smaller voting rights, smaller individual rights, and not
Yeah.
that's not conservative. That's just theological bullshit.
Okay. I had a
Um,
thought and I lost it. Damn it.
oh,
But I told, oh, because I had like somebody asked me, who's your audience? Because you don't like Democrats or Republicans. And I was like,
no.
my audience is just, I don't know. And it dawned on me, like conservatives must hate me, you know, and like liberals must hate me too. I had an Elizabeth Warren fan just call me a dumbass for telling her that, you know, her messaging was wrong. And but I think it's important for like Republicans to know that what's going on. Like, no, your Republican Party isn't a Republican ideology anymore. You know what I mean? I think
Hmm.
that's important because I think they're getting fed a line of crap and what all it is you're fighting a race war, and you're using little dog whistles to do that, because right
Hmm.
now the white majority is going to become in 10 years the white minority, and that's the existential threat to Republicans. It's the climate change to Republicans, you know what I mean?
But to me, that's the hilarious part about it is that, you have this group of people that, are afraid of becoming a minority. But when you look at the way that their current system of trying to do government works, you know, there's a lot of people in the Latin community that are conservative because they come up in, very
Mhm.
conservative Christian households, in that regard. And there's a lot of people who are black conservatives because they come up in very strict religious households. Like,
You know why Latins are, sorry, I'll let you go on.
no,
Why
no, no.
Latins are conservative? Because they came here through the system properly, and they hate illegal immigration.
So to me, like, and that's where Democrats tend to fall off, is that is that they tend to think that, oh well, because they're a person of color they're going to vote for me. And then you look at the actual breakdown of it and it's like, that's true in a lot of senses, but there's a lot of it that's not.
Oh yeah,
And
you can't get a Cuban to vote for a socialist agenda, and the
oh hell
Democrats
no.
giving money away for free is socialism to them. You know what I mean?
You'd say, right. And so, it's to me, it's very funny how the system tends to try and lump these things together. And it's like,
Yeah. That's what the
yeah.
that's what the brain does though. We can't handle the fact that there's 7 billion unique organisms in this world. So we try and break them down. We try and lump them together. That's why we have wedges. That's why we have gay people. Guess what? I mean, it's a spectrum, right? Like there's some
Hmm.
days that I'm not feeling very sexual, which would make me asexual, which would mean that that day I'm part of the LGBT and I'm an ally. Some days I don't like myself and I want to change my body, and maybe that's something else, and we don't realize that everything is a spectrum, that somebody can be uh, on the spectrum of blindness because they're not 20/20, when we just look down on the people that are 20/40, who look down on the people that are 20/60, who look down on the you know what I mean? And it's this,
Right.
but we're all partly autistic, we all partly have ADHD. It's how this world is. We're all a spectrum, but not all black people are the same. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they have infighting. In the BLM community, there's infighting. And in every organization that tries to do, when they fail or when they succeed, they begin eating themselves. They
Hmm.
begin eating each other. Black men are on the front line of the BLM movement, but it was created by black women who are now being told to shut the fuck up. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? So you
Yep.
can't look at it that way. We can't look at it like that we're all the same, because nobody is the same. And we got to realize that we're all
Yeah.
people, and the government is run by people, but they have rules to follow, and that's called bureaucracy. And we need to fix that. And people can do that if they wanted to.
Yeah. And that's why, I really think what needs to happen is about every 50 years we do a full audit of the government.
Hell yeah.
You
We should be
know,
doing that all the time. Like I said, after a president, we should do a full 9/11 commission for that president to see what actually he accomplished and what he failed at and how we could do better in the next one?
I could see that potentially being useful,
Mhm.
potentially.
But just data.
One of
It's
the
just
things
data. It's not laws. Like we're gonna
I think I think I think you can do it better real time, and that's just and
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's just a and have the post presidency wrap up. You could do
Right. Yeah.
you could do something like that. Absolutely.
I
I
like
mean,
that.
in Montana, for example, every 30 years they're required to vote on whether or not they rewrite their constitution.
That's right.
So to me, that's something that'll never happen at the United States level, but
Well, it's being rewritten every day by reinterpretations of people that claim that they follow the letter of the Constitution.
yeah, right. So to me, it's one of those things, like, there is a way that we can do this and we can do it well,
Hmm.
but
We as people, we can't do that audit because we're not privy to all of the information,
No.
right? And so, and the government is, they are privy to the information, and so cherry picking will occur. And so,
Oh, absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
it has to be a commission, and it has to be a group of people that have access to that subpoena power, all that stuff, so they can bring people in, not for the cameras, not for criminality, but just to say this is where we were, this is where we are, where do we need to go? You know what I mean?
Well, but unfortunately, right now we're at that point of we're at the point of politics where there's no let's come together and work on this to make it better. You've got the two sides that have decided that a screaming match is far better than actual, compromise and working together. You know,
Financially.
if financially or even just on camera, looking at Jim Jordan.
Well, of course, but that's so he can get donations. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's all about the finances. Jim Jordan wouldn't get up and speak it for free. You know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Right. Right. And every time Jim Jordan gets up and starts screaming, he just shows his ass at how much he does not know.
That's right. And that's why we support Jeff Seitz, because he's running against Jim Jordan. And Jeff Seitz had a handicapped brother, and so he cares about the stuff I care about. And we're trying to get him on the show. By the way, he's just
Mm.
he says he's busy, but
Well,
whatever.
that's yeah. What else you got?
Oh, this one is good because this one makes me laugh, and it's part of the first question I asked. So Florida and Iowa, one of the I's, Florida and another state created this law that says you're immune from prosecution if you run into protesters,
Oh
right?
God.
But here's the weird thing to me is like my immediate thought was three guys in MAGA hats drunk walking out of a bar and an Antifa person going, that looks like a protest to me. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, honestly, the violence was like, you can't say that MAGA doesn't protest, right?
Hmm.
And they wanted to do that at every state capital. Now, what's stopping anybody from just running into those people? You know?
Nothing.
No, so you're just putting your own voters at risk. Like, it's amazing to me that racists are so tone deaf to their own racism that they will enact laws that benefit the radicals on the other side. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying Antifa is a black or a white thing. It's a belief in anti-fascism, but radicals have been attached to that, and so I'm using the word for people. Antifa could literally run down a bunch of MAGA people because they have a sign on their head. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's
Government bureaucracy at its finest. You pass something that you think is going to be beneficial to you,
right.
and then when it gets used against you, surprise Pikachu face. JPEG.
I know, right? And then
Whatever.
but that wasn't a protest. Okay, let's see. That
Y-
I thought that was funny. It's just they're so tone deaf that they can create laws like that.
Well, that's government. I would say that's any government in a nutshell. I'm going to make this so that way it benefits my people alone. And then the other
Mhm.
party uses it, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Well, I didn't mean like that." Well, that's not how you worded it.
All right. How about this? I got a great fun one, and it's just it's going to be a total hypothetical. It's never going to happen. Nothing's ever going to happen. But I want to fix racism real quick. Can we do that?
I mean, that'd be great. I'd like
Okay.
that.
So here's my theory. A contest, right? Every race just picks their best I don't know, the best version of that race, and then we have a contest. But now this contest incorporates all other contests. It could be a shot put event, it could be a medical exam, it could be target practice, it could be Big Brother, it could be Survivor, it could be a spelling bee. It doesn't that doesn't matter, but you're going to come up and every race is going to have to do a beauty pageant, of all of these contests, and at the end we know who the supreme race is for the next 4 years, like the Olympics. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna go with yikes.
Yeah. You don't like the idea?
Oh, hell no.
Well,
Uh,
what I think would happen, honestly, is that people would realize that they're not superior in every way, and that there is no way to be superior as a race, right? Because the strongest man might not be the healthiest, and so I don't know.
you're relying on people to look at something objectively, and that's the problem. Is that these people are purely subjective, and you're not going to be able to take any objective measure and convince them otherwise.
Okay, so
It's kind of
what's
like
the
how objectively you can show that vaccines do not cause autism, they do not cause cancer,
right?
but subjectively they're going to sit down and they're constantly going to say, no, well, I'm not taking the vaccine because it's only got emergency use, it's not actually FDA approved, and we don't know if people are going to drop dead from cancer in like 8 to 10 years, despite the fact that that's never happened before. And oh yeah, they totally cause autism, and it's only been shown in one study that was entirely debunked because the guy that actually, like, you're not going to actually see anybody take this objectively and go, yes, that is clearly what this means. These people are stuck in such a subjective state of mind that they are right, and there is nothing that you can ever do to convince them otherwise.
No,
So, while I appreciate the idea, that's never going to fucking happen.
I want people to be introspective, though. I want them to look around and try and pick the best version of their race. I want them to realize that um, in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and all the other Middle Eastern countries, that guess what? It's not a country that designs your, like, we call people African American, but there's people that are um I'm I hate the term black. You know what I mean? Because it's such an identifier, but not everybody's African American. And
Well,
some,
and
you know what
that's
I
the
mean?
thing is, I've had friends, that have asked me that. It's like, are you white or are you European American?
Hmm.
I'm not European American. I'm white. My family's been in the country for quite a while.
I'm ketchup. I'm just
So
Heinz 57. I'm everything. You know what I mean? But
I am a meat popsicle.
but that's my point, is that if you're looking for perfection in your race, you're never going to find it. You're just never going to find it, and therefore nobody is superior. But I'm trying to find a way to get people to understand the lack of superiority. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
I don't know how to do that. White people, you're not superior, and nobody else is. It takes all of us together, and that's why I love mixed babies, because it's the best of everything all in one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally get it, but I
You don't.
also know that these people are totally subjective, and there's no there's no reasoning, there's no logic, there is nothing you will ever be able to present
Okay.
to these people that will ever sway that. And it's until they figure it out on their own,
Hmm.
the just looking up the stories of what people have experienced,
Right.
what made them overcome their own issues.
Hmm.
it's it takes a moment of reckoning for each individual, and the reality is that that reckoning usually is very few and far between, and what you grow up in an information standpoint and what you're taught makes it very difficult to overcome.
Okay. I love it. So, what do you think about uh the Derek Chauvin trial? So they said it needed, people are saying this is crazy that we needed all of this evidence to get a conviction. But I think we just found a template for success in accountability. Do you think, well, I just wanted to do a, everybody's doing this George Floyd, Derek Chauvin thing, but I, looking at it introspectively, is this a good template? Is there things we can improve on to make this better and easier? Because it
Mhm.
looks like a victory to me, but I want the next one to follow the same scenarios. You know what I mean?
So let's start with the trial itself.
Hmm.
Is the trial itself, I mean, yeah, um the prosecution was, the prosecution won, and what most people need to understand is that, from a federal level, because that's when I worked in the courts, that's where I worked in primarily, was in the federal level. The federal government has a 97% conviction rate. So if charges are brought against you, it's pretty good chance that you're not going to walk away from it.
A lot of plea deals.
Lots of plea deals, but also lots of convictions.
You know what's funny? Derek Chauvin's attorneys asked for a plea deal of 10 years and prosecutors said no. And what I think is, so in the analysis, instead of using prosecutors stuck in the system, they went out and they got private attorneys, private
Mhm.
prosecutors. And I think that changed the way the case was prosecuted. And I like that. I like that. So I think that's part of the template that we should consider next time.
Special prosecutors are very much an important part of
Yeah,
major cases, something like this,
right.
because the reality is like, my former boss was a federal prosecutor at one point who then moved into defense and civil litigation. Prosecutors are very cold, very methodical
Yeah.
lawyers.
Oh,
It's
definitely.
very much a, here's the report, and then what happened, and then what happened, and then what happened. It's emotionless. It's based entirely on fact, and
Mhm.
also trying to disqualify the other side based on their emotions.
I love that, by the
Whereas,
way. We needed that.
whereas the defense is typically very much a, this is a person, whole that has X, Y, and Z, and
Hmm.
there's this dynamic range. But at the same time too, like the defense community was not very thrilled with the way that this particular lawyer decided to represent Chauvin.
Was
And
was it a fail of the defense or was it approving of a template?
ah,
If there was a better
column A and
defense.
column B. It's
Okay.
column A and column B. Basically, one of the things that we've kind of talked about is that within the defense community, who a person hires very much uh, gives you a good idea of what this person is actually like. And
Okay.
whoever this defense attorney was, man, they are, whew, wow,
Right.
just wow. Trying to go the angry black man route was not a good decision. That really
Right.
got a lot of people worked up. The prosecution was cold though,
Mhm.
and I don't think that I while what happened has worked, the fact of the matter is like, for example, when it was time for the jury to make a decision, normally when you have a quick verdict, it's going to be in favor of the prosecution
Oh yeah, yeah.
overwhelmingly.
And it was 10 hours, but you got to
11
remember that
hours, but even
they
still, like,
slept for 7 or 8 of those, right?
no, those 11 total hours of deliberation time.
Ah, okay.
So one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that, when we say short, we're talking like 4 hours ish.
Okay.
So this went longer than most of us expected it to. Now, from our experience, at least from my experience, I should say, is that when you have something like that go longer, where it takes about a day in order to get things figured out, it's usually because they've hung on the most severe charge.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm about 95% sure that the reason it took as long as it did was probably because they hung on that first charge initially. But there were no jury questions, and that was a key in that.
Right.
Uh, if you have jury questions, a lot of the times they're, depending on how they're worded, they're looking for a reason to convict a person, not necessarily to acquit a person. And that's where,
Oh wow.
based on the way that the question comes out, it could be a failure of the defense. The fact that there were no questions that came out of this, I
Mhm.
would say, is a failure of the defense.
Right. So, do you think he should have put the system on trial as opposed to Chauvin? For as a defense, do you think he should have said it wasn't my client, it was the system?
No,
No.
because the problem there.
It's systemic. Everybody else is doing it. He just is the one that got caught.
Right. So then the problem there is that both sides of this, they played a very delicate game of, let's
Mm,
try not to indict the system,
right.
because that's going to open up a can of worms that neither the state nor defense, well, those defending cops, I should say, are ready for.
Okay.
The DOJ is opening that can of worms.
Yeah, it is.
and that's a whole nother topic. I would say that you have a good starting template as to how you should approach these particular cases.
Okay.
Um,
But it
because
wasn't perfect. It didn't
it wasn't
succeed
perfect.
because it was perfect.
It didn't
Right.
succeed because it was perfect. And it certainly didn't succeed, I would say, because uh, the evidence, how do I phrase this? The evidence was overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
but the prosecution the prosecution didn't do the best job of showing, I would say, the aggravators uh, that would lead to higher, the higher levels, like murder too.
Okay.
And that's why I say I think that's why the jury took as long as it did to reach a verdict, is I think that they struggled with murder too. That's
Hmm.
typically what happens, because a lot of the times with juries, what you'll get is they'll agree to the lesser charges right away.
Right.
Those will happen really quickly. So my guess is that Man 2, that was a given. Murder
Manslaughter.
3,
Right.
yeah, Murder 3 was probably almost unanimous, but might have had a little bit of a discussion on it. Murder 2, on the other hand, that's probably where things got hung up.
Okay.
And so a lot of us that have worked in the defense community looked at that and said, okay, so what most likely is happening here is that they're going to acquit him on murder too.
Hmm.
That was what a lot of us started feeling at that moment when it was taking so long. Now, that said, I don't know very many defense lawyers who were looking for a defense win.
Right.
Um,
No, nobody
one of the
really wanted the defense win. But I don't think the jury was, people are saying that the mob made the jury vote this way.
oh
I don't, I think you're eliminating all of the evidence. And that girl that filmed that 9 minute and 30-second video, I think she should be person of the year on Time. You know what I mean?
oh,
I think
absolutely.
but I think the fact that we need that much evidence, and even then, as you're recording that evidence, you're still on, that girl was on trial as an angry mob, right? Like
Right.
she was part of an angry mob because she sent her younger sister into the store to not see a man be murdered, and so
Mhm.
even with that indictment, like people had to record the mob to prove that, you know what I mean?
And that's just it, is that, the whole argument around body cameras and things like that is that, you know y- you should want as much evidence as possible
Hell
in
yeah.
order to prove beyond a reasonable doubt of what happened. you know I've talked about this before. Does the camera lie? Absolutely, because
Mhm.
depending on the quality and the frame rate that you were filming, did someone fire 5 shots or did they fire 3?
Did he die of
And
carbon monoxide poisoning or was the an electric car?
and so there's a lot of, having the amount of evidence that you can get.
Mhm.
What you still have to understand, though, is that I say that with the amount of evidence that exists, people at trial usually only get about 10% of it, depending on the trial,
Okay.
because there's a lot of things that people throw out there, that the prosecution will throw out there, that the defense will throw out there. It's a baffle them with bullshit strategy sometimes, and I guarantee you that the amount of discovery that there was in that case was probably absolutely insane.
Yeah, right.
And when I say the amount, I'm talking about bankers boxes. I'm talking about terabytes.
Mm.
You wouldn't think that you needed more than 9 minutes and 30 seconds of video, but I guarantee you that you had as many clips as possible from as many angles as possible, and looking
Repeating
for
them,
any
right.
and looking for any possible in or out of certain charges. I guarantee it.
Mm.
The amount of paperwork that was filed, I guarantee you Chauvin's entire police history is located in that discovery box. I guarantee
Yeah,
you
as well as all the
that,
police officers that worked around him to prove an average, you know what I mean?
and I guarantee you that every policy that has ever existed is probably in that discovery file. And I guarantee you that every policy on training and use of force and all that like the amount of, and I guarantee you that they never saw any of that. The jury didn't. And why? Because sometimes it's irrelevant, sometimes it is just litigated out. It's like
Yeah,
you can't use that.
right. But it was all, everything they had was on a laptop given to them, which I thought was interesting.
So it's the amount of information that exists within a jury trial is usually mind-boggling. For one case I worked, just in paper alone, there were 50,000 pages that I had to read through.
Wow, yeah.
So for a case this large, I guarantee you that that case was bankers boxes full of information and
Oh
hard
yeah.
drives full of information, and the jury saw maybe 10% of that at best.
Wow. Okay. And then what do you think that the other thing I really think might have changed it was the fact that it was on TV. That the what was the prosecution said they didn't want it on TV. Chauvin said one of those, but the judge said in the end
The defense
that
didn't want it on TV.
okay, so but I really think that changed a lot, and I'm not quite sure how it would have since everything was so insulated, but I just think that having it on TV made a difference.
So with the jury, what most people don't realize is that with the jury, once a jury is selected, they're not allowed to read the news.
Right.
I mean, like they're not supposed to be on. They're pretty much not supposed to be on any devices at all. They're not supposed to look up anything.
They're given
Uh,
Netflix. They're given Netflix, by the way. That's this
mhm.
jury had Netflix. That's what they had to watch.
Depending on the rules that get established, so like for example, the biggest argument that you heard was about sequestering. So
Right.
sequestering, for those who don't know, is basically you get locked in a hotel room. You have no access to TV. You have no access to. You have very limited access to internet.
Right.
The idea is that you can't be influenced by outside sources. People can't send you anything. You can't read anything. You can't do anything that is going to potentially sway you from the outside. With all of that information that was out there, a lot of the defense wanted people sequestered.
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, the issue that you were going to have is that this was a case of national attention. So the reality of finding
Worldwide, yeah.
world attention, yeah, exactly. So the idea that you're going to find somebody that hasn't at least heard about this, hmm. I mean, it was always possible that you were going to find people who didn't watch the video,
Sure.
because let's face it, that's not an easy video to watch.
Mm.
It's not.
It's not supposed to be though.
Exactly. And for many people, that trauma is not something that a lot of people willingly subject themselves to.
Right.
When I worked in the defense, I watched those videos and I watched them over and over and over, and I looked at the photos and I looked at the reports, and you get so dug in deep in these cases. I would argue that it's no different than what the media does, where they constantly blast this across your news screen, but
Right.
instead of cold hard reports, it's you're watching this video with somebody else's opinion blasted over the top of it.
Right.
And take that as you will, because we know that there's bias in the media. That's just the truth of it.
It's the truth. There's bias in humanity, by the way.
Absolutely.
We all see things a different way, and we're not willing to put on another person's perspective to see it their way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, trying to limit, the number of biases that you have in a juror, I mean, the reality is that, moving venue, moving anywhere, people courts don't like to move venue unless there's a really good reason to move venue, and I mean
Right.
really 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 good.
Hmm.
And it's usually because there's somebody in the court involved.
Right.
So that was never going to happen. And the idea that you were going to get a jury that hadn't at least heard about this case. Not going to happen.
Right. But you can still be objective. I think
Absolutely, you can still be objective.
I
And
could be objective, but I still would have come to the conclusion long before the prosecution rested, you know?
well, and depending on the state, you some states actually have laws in place where if they think, if a jury thinks that a particular punishment isn't harsh enough or is too harsh,
Hmm,
or that the law itself is outdated, a jury can actually override because
nice.
they see it some states see it as the duty of the jury to inform the court of the public that they don't see this as something that needs to be carried forward. I believe that Montana had a marijuana case like that,
Hmm,
where the dude, for the amount of weed that he had, should have been going to jail for a while, but the jury failed to convict him and basically said that we believe that these laws are outdated and they do not serve any interest of justice whatsoever. So
okay.
we refuse to convict. And the court had no choice but to accept the verdict of the jury.
That's cool.
And so to me, that's one of those things where, you know, I honestly think that's something that needs to expand more. Is the if you're going to have a jury of your peers to decide whether or not someone is guilty, you have the application of the law is important, but if the law is outdated,
Yeah.
a jury needs to have the power and the authority to say we refuse to convict or acquit because we think that this law is outdated.
Hmm. They should have more than one option for sure.
Absolutely. But going back, this particular case showcased a lot of failings. It showcased the failings of the prosecution. It showcased the failings of the defense. It showcased the failings of the court.
Hmm.
And in the end, do I think the verdict was right? Yes. Do I think that there's now a template established for how you try this? Yes. Do I think that that template is going to hold up?
Or
Only,
improve. Can
only,
we build on this base?
only if you get rid of qualified immunity.
Yeah. Okay.
Because while this case I think is a start of dismantling qualified immunity for places that still have it,
Hmm.
I would say that unfortunately we're going to see this again, and we're going to see a state use and apply qualified immunity in such a way that it won't be convicted, and it will set up a fight at a circuit level or at the Supreme Court level.
Sure.
It's not perfect. It's a good start, but there are other things that have to be uh, dealt with in order to make sure that you don't have this miscarriage of justice in the
Right.
long run.
In the long run. And it's not a binary thing. Qualified immunity, it can be for some officers that are put into these hazardous positions, but not your average beat cop. You know what I mean? Like SWAT comes out, your beat cop doesn't have a gun anymore. SWAT comes out, they might have qualified immunity, you know what I mean? And more of an investigation. But now you're not investigating every situation that way, you know what I mean?
Well, and you also have to change a lot of the systems too. For example,
Yeah.
if you got mental health crisis, you shouldn't be showing up with a fucking armed officer anyways.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know why you need an armed officer for a traffic stop. We talked about that last week. So,
Like if you're going to pull somebody over and if it's for a speeding ticket, great, you
mhm,
snap the ticket, they get a ticket. But if the car turns up, if the license plate turns up that it's stolen, then yeah, you should probably be pulling that vehicle over with more than one officer.
but you call for backup, right?
Exactly. But
Yeah,
the idea that a speeding ticket requires somebody to get pulled over, come on.
that's true.
Yeah, or that the officer says that the window tint is too dark. Okay,
Hmm.
well, are they doing anything else? No. Okay, capture the license plate, write him a ticket for too dark a tint.
Right. Well,
You know,
there's ways around it. I like that.
there absolutely is. There are absolutely ways around it. You know,
And you
In
know,
that way, here's the other thing. If somebody is speeding and you just capture the license plate and just plug in doing 75 and a 60, that officer has no idea if the person in that car is white or black.
that's
In
right.
theory, in
There,
theory.
you're absolutely right. And people get running toll booth running red light tickets all the time in the mail.
Right. It depends on the state law. Some places it's like you have the right to face your accuser, and suppose Arizona had a weird law on the books for a while that you had the right to face your accuser. Your accuser was the photo booth on the traffic, and since you can't bring the photo booth in, supposedly it was like, okay, technicality,
Yeah,
clever, but I'm gonna have to go with, you know that just captured the evidence. The officer has to review it and be like, yeah, I accuse you of running a red light.
right.
Here's the evidence.
And you know what's disturbing to me about the Chauvin trial is while that was going on, Jacob Blake's the officer that shot Jacob Blake returned to work, and the officer involved in the Breonna Taylor incident got a book deal.
Let's also not fail to mention you had a couple of people get shot
Oh my God, yeah,
by
like
cops, like
wow.
two or three. One right when the fucking verdict was being read. Although I will say
Yeah,
that my favorite part about this was somebody hijacked Chicago PD's radio to play the verdict of the Chauvin trial on repeat.
that's funny. And yeah, Dante Blake. Man,
Dante Rot, right?
Dante
Rot,
Wright. I'm
right.
sorry. No, because I saw Al Sharpton was on the way to the funeral and he was like, I'm on the way for the Durandre Wright. And I was like, you asshole. You're like, you're riding in the car with his family to go to his funeral and you can't pronounce his name. I was just so irritated because Dante Wright for having an air freshener and no tags got shot. And that's just I don't know. Like during the trial, I was just
Well, that's and of course the thing that's gonna get, oh well, he had a warrant out. Okay, having a warrant out isn't a death sentence. I'm sorry.
do you know what the
Like,
warrant was for?
nope.
It
I
failed.
have not.
It's a failure to appear. Do you know why
Yeah,
he failed to appear? Because they sent it to the wrong address.
that sounds about right. That
Yep.
that sounds about like every fucking court that I've ever worked in.
I know, right?
No,
So
seriously, I can't tell you how many cases where I would have to forward something on to my boss that, hey, our client got a failure to appear.
mhm.
Why? Why did our client get a failure to appear? One time, one of our clients got a failure to appear. They were in fucking jail, and they sent the notice to the wrong jail. And so the
Exactly.
jail didn't produce the client that they didn't have. So our client got a failure to appear. And it's like, that's not his fucking fault. He's
Right?
literally in jail.
But that
What was he gonna do? Break out of jail and show up to fucking court?
but Dante Wright died because of bureaucracy.
No, and that's just it. Once again, a,
Sucks.
a warrant is not a death sentence. A fake $20 bill, supposedly fake $20 bill, is not a death
Supposedly.
sentence. The number of death sentences handed out by cops is just absolutely insane.
Well, the police aren't the jury and executioner. They're just the one that collect the evidence, you know? And
Supposed to be, but supposed to
honestly,
be, but you've got too many people that are just like, oh well, they were a criminal anyway. Well, who
mhm,
convicted them? Who convicted them of a crime? Were they
exactly.
convicted by a jury of their peers? So does that mean that if you get pulled over and shot, my response should be, well, you were a criminal anyways?
Right.
No.
No.
And
No.
even if you were, what they are being murdered for is not a death sentence.
Even if they were a bad person. That's the problem. I think we just have prejudgments that way.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
but do police actually fuck, we got like 2 minutes left, Jesse. I mean, do police actually prevent crime or do they just come and collect the evidence of it? You know what I mean?
Uh, you know, I would say that if they actually were forced to do things to benefit the community, they
Hmm.
could prevent crime. Absolutely.
Live within the community, be somebody that community members could report to and talk to on a daily basis.
You supply help other than a fucking gun. You know, think about it. No,
Yes.
think about it. Think about the number of cases where people go, "Oh, look at this cop. He actually took a pair of shoes to a person who didn't have shoes," or
Mm,
this cop bought someone's groceries when they were running out, or bought this,
yeah.
elderly person's pills. Two questions. Number one, why is a cop having to do that? Let's start
Right.
there. Number two, um, if we're going to have people do outreach to the community, I I don't want a cop doing that. I want somebody who's actually trained to go out and work with people who are in need or
Yes.
having crisis.
Yes.
So that way they come with the toolbox that is appropriate for the tool. Do
Yeah.
we need cops? Absolutely. I need cops that are going to be fighting and fighting violent criminals. I need cops that are actually going to fight and
Yeah.
find violent criminals, people that are doing actual harm.
Mm-hmm.
Shooting somebody in the back while they're running away, I'm sorry, that's not, no. Shooting somebody because they're having a mental crisis, no. Shooting somebody because they're having an autistic meltdown in the middle of the street, no. Shooting somebody because they have a warrant, no. Shooting somebody because they're a 13-year-old, and no. Like,
Right.
there are so many things that they're trained for a very specific purpose, and we're using a giant fucking sledgehammer on a
Yeah.
finishing nail.
And on some, yeah, because the reasons for crime and the reasons somebody's a criminal are systemic, and you're
Mm,
not gonna solve that at the end. But I'm gonna wrap up with a final statement and say, like, people think that it's okay that black people are dying because white people are dying too, and you shouldn't be okay with either one.
exactly. You if you think it's okay, you're entirely missing the point. It's not okay that people are dying from the cops
Nope,
when they haven't gone through the justice system.
that's right.
If they have actually committed a crime. If they have actually committed a crime, cops are not the jury. They're not the judge.
Mm-mm.
They're certainly being the executioner, but that shouldn't be the case at all.
Not whether you're black or whether you're white.
And the number of things that cops are being sent out to, that's just not their wheelhouse, man.
That's
Like,
what I said. Give them a raise and have them deliver my pizzas. You know what I mean? Because they do everything else.
right, if you're going to have the cops show up to deal with things, have them show up to deal with the things that they're supposed to be dealing with.
Yeah,
Not people that are struggling to make ends meet, not people who are, in crisis for various reasons,
hmm,
not people who are just living their life the best that they can,
right.
and struggling with that. So, until you fundamentally change what you use the police for,
Hmm.
this is going to continue.
Yeah,
And so my hope is that, you know, my hope is that while while people look at this whole defund the police thing, it's defunding to take cops to use them in the situations that they are supposed to be used in,
yes,
not in all these other situations that literally do nothing to fix the ills that happen within society.
yeah. It's redefining.
Running a homeless person through the justice system 1,000 times doesn't fix the homelessness issue.
No, and you're not making money off of that. You're just spending money to spend your budget. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's a shame. All right. You got any good movie suggestions?
Good movie suggestions. I love Jurassic Park still. 30 years later.
Yeah, me too.
Watched that last night and it was fantastic.
Oof. I'll tell
They
you
did
what.
such a good job on that movie.
They did. I didn't like the follow-up stuff. Not
No, they've
because of the
sucked.
graphics. I mean, I think it was the last one that came out. I was like, that wasn't bad. The graphics weren't bad. The acting wasn't great, you know.
Yeah, Jurassic, I'd say that Jurassic World, the first one, was probably the best one since the
Yeah.
original.
Yeah.
I mean, but you're never going to match the magic of the original. That's just it.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you, do not watch The Joker if you're sad or depressed. Because by the end of that movie, I was like, I think I'm just going to jump off my balcony. I started depressed and I was like, I don't know, I'm going to watch it. And I halfway through, I was like, I shouldn't be watching this. And by the end, I was like, I should not have done that.
Yeah.
But I did see the new Mortal Kombat, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I liked it. I liked it a lot.
I've heard that it's great and I need to watch it. So
I don't know if it's great. I don't know if it's great, but it is really good and it leaves it open for a sequel. And that's what's exciting to me. And it was all nonstop. Like I have to stand up and like watch the TV. And so I stood
mhm.
for 2 hours. like because there was no chance for me to be like, oh, here's the slow half hour where I can go sit on the couch. It was like fight, 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 cool, fight. Ooh, nice. So yeah.
Yes.
Love it. Thanks for being here, Jeffrey. I appreciate you most of all.
Love you, man.
Love you too. Have a great day.
You too.
Pause.